Matt and Rita had been married for 8 years. On paper, they were a perfect couple. Matt was 39, a tall, well-built corporate project manager who had worked his way up from humble beginnings. Rita, 34, was a former high school literature teacher who had quit her job 5 years ago to focus on building their dream home, supporting Matt's rise. In trying for a family, though, that part never quite worked out. To friends and neighbors and their peaceful suburban community, they were a model couple, handsome, well-mannered, successful, and always showing up together at events, smiling politely, even if behind those smiles were buried silences no one ever noticed. But inside their 4-bedroom house with polished floors and white curtains, the air had long turned stale. The truth was, the spark had gone out years ago. The once adoring glances had turned into cold stares. Conversations became mechanical. Touches were less affectionate and more routine, like ticking boxes. They still shared a bed, but sleep was the only thing that ever happened in it. Their fights weren't explosive, but that was almost worse. They were muted, passive-aggressive, filled with eye rolls, sarcasm, and long stretches of silence. No cheating accusations, no scandals. Just boredom, frustration, resentment. Matt in particular didn't notice how deeply Rita was beginning to detach. He was always focused on work, back-to-back meetings, business trips, late-night calls. He convinced himself that providing financially was enough, that her silence was just fatigue, that every couple after a few years just settled down. But Rita hadn't signed up for that kind of settling. Rita had needs: emotional, physical, psychological. She missed being seen, being desired. She missed being a woman, not just a wife. Sometimes she'd look in the mirror and feel like she was fading the version of herself that used to be flirtatious, spontaneous, full of life was gone. In its place was someone tired, unfulfilled, and invisible. In her own marriage, she started spending more time online. Instagram, Pinterest, private women's groups. On Facebook, she followed pages on rediscovering yourself, self-care, and later more risque forums on bored housewives. It started innocently, just chatting, reading posts, but slowly a shift began. She downloaded a couple of anonymous chat as not to cheat, not at first, but to feel noticed again. Wanted. Matt never knew what neither of them could have predicted was that the crack, and their marriage would be shattered by their own blood. Matt's nephews. It was during the summer at a backyard party Matt threw to celebrate his promotion. The day was bright hot, with steaks sizzling on the grill and music drifting lazily through the air. Relatives gathered, drinks clinked and laughter rang out. That's when Dan and Jake walked in. Dan, 21, was Matt's elder brother's son. Tall, cocky, confident, a college junior with a gym body, messy hair, and a smug smile that hinted at mischief. Jake, 19, was leaner but sharper, clever with his words, quieter but quick-witted. Both had that raw magnetism that young men in their early 20s sometimes do, especially when they know. They greeted Matt like any good nephews would, but when they met Rita something changed. It wasn't immediate or obvious, but it was there. The long eye contact, the way Jake's eyes didn't leave her legs as she walked away, the way Dan's laughter seemed to get louder when she was nearby and Rita felt it. She wore a light floral summer dress. That day, she remembered noticing how Jake's eyes lingered just a second too long on the strap of her dress, slipping off her shoulder. Dan made some joke about her looking too young to be married, and she had laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt good. That thrill, that tingle, that dangerous electricity. She hadn't. 1,000 years as the party wound down and most people were getting ready to leave, Dan and Jake stayed behind, helping Matt carry stuff back into the kitchen. Rita offered them lemonade and sat with them outside, making small talk that flirted dangerously close to something deeper. Dan asked for her number in case they wanted her banana bread recipe, and Jake smirked as she gave it. Matt, tired from the barbecue and mildly tipsy, went to bed early. He didn't notice the spark in Rita's eyes that hadn't been there in years. The texts started that very night. First a thank you, then a flirty compliment, then an emoji, then a photo. Not nude, but suggestive. Within a week, the three of them had their own private group chat, nicknames, inside jokes, code words. And within 3 weeks it had evolved into something far more intimate. The first physical affair happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Matt was on a business trip in Delhi. Rita invited Dan over for help moving furniture. It wasn't subtle. They both knew why he was coming. They kissed in the kitchen, fumbled into the living room, and by the time Rita lay breathless on the couch, flushed and shaken, she knew she had crossed a line she could never walk back from. But she didn't feel guilt. Not yet. She felt pricker. Jake joined in a week later. Rita met him in a hotel room outside town. It felt wrong in the exact way she wanted it to. A secret escape, a rebellion against the life that made her feel like a ghost. And it didn't stop. They began meeting regularly, sometimes together, sometimes separately. It became an addiction. Each encounter riskier than the last. Rita transformed. She dressed differently. She laughed more. She ignored Matt completely now, not out of hatred but indifference. He no longer existed in her world. Her body belonged to someone else now. Or in this case, 21 night during a particularly intense mission in a hotel room, Dan pulled out his phone and joked, "You'll want to remember this night." Jake laughed. Rita hesitated, then agreed. She watched herself on camera, legs tangled, lips parted, moaning for boys she used to babysit during family holidays, and somehow it turned her on more. They filmed everything after that, in hotels and bathrooms, even in the guest bedroom of Matt's own house while he was at a conference. Rita stored every clip in a hidden folder on her laptop, password protected, deep inside a dummy work directory labeled Budget Planning 2018. She was careful, methodical, ruthless. What she never realized, what none of them ever saw coming, was that all it would take was one forgotten click, one careless night, one open screen to unleash hell. And that night was getting closer. That night arrived like any other. A quiet Thursday. Rain drizzled. Outside, tapping the window panes, Rita had spent most of the afternoon lying on the couch, lazily scrolling through her phone, grinning at fresh messages from Dan. Jake had sent a selfie earlier from the gym, shirt off, drenched in sweat. Her fingers traced the screen for a second too long. Desire simmered beneath her skin. She wasn't stupid. She knew the line she'd crossed wasn't just emotional infidelity. It was betrayal laced with humiliation. But instead of guilt, she felt emboldened. Her mind, twisted by weeks of secrecy and adrenaline, had grown addicted to the thrill of deception. The more dangerous it got, the more alive she felt. It wasn't about love. Not anymore. It was dominance, control, validation. Her marriage, by comparison, felt like an expired document, buried in the drawer, once relevant, now forgotten. Dan and Jake had become her fix. They flirted with ease, complimented without filters, and gave her the kind of ravenous tension that made her feel 20 again. They made jokes Matt wouldn't understand, sent photos Matt would never take, said things Matt never dared to say. They'd grown reckless too, sending late-night voice notes with heavy breathing, teasing her with videos from their dorm parties, some even suggesting bringing their friends next time. One weekend, while Matt attended a business seminar in Mumbai, Rita invited both nephews over under the guise of reorganizing the garage. The plan was as audacious as it was insane. They didn't even reach the garage. They ended up in the master bedroom, Matsuura bedroom. Their uncle's shirts still hung in the closet. His cologne set on the dresser. None of it deterred them. If anything, it spiced the moment. Rita, consumed by something between arrogance and lust, demanded they film it. "Make it unforgettable," she whispered. That night, the camera captured her in ways she never imagined. She'd see herself, two young men, both her husband's family, locked in passion with a woman who once taught 7th grade English. The thrill had twisted into something darker, territorial, deranged. And still, she stored it. The folder had now swelled with nearly 24 clips, each more explicit than the last. She gave it a new name. Utilities Backup 22.zip. A joke to herself, she even layered the folder inside 3 subfolders with boring names like tax files and school reports. But Rita wasn't as untouchable as she thought. Her paranoia started subtly once Matt came home earlier than expected and found Rita in the guest room, still disheveled, she claimed. He just finished cleaning. He stared at her, puzzled by the red flush on her cheeks and the faint smell of male cologne. But he didn't push. He never pushed. Another time Jake messaged the wrong number. He thought he was texting Rita. He wasn't. Fortunately, the message was vague, but it was a close call too. Closed despite these brushes with disaster, Rita didn't stop. She escalated. She bought lingerie and left notes for Dan inside packages under fake names. She sent Jake a hotel keycard once tucked inside a used book mailed to his university dorm. She even dared to sneak a recording on her phone while giving Dan a lap dance in the backyard. Claiming she was just testing night vision. What she didn't realize was that obsession makes people sloppy. The night everything unraveled, Rita had been editing a clip, cropping out background noise, adjusting angles, adding slow-motion effects. She fell asleep before she could finish. Her laptop remained open. The screen dimmed but didn't lock. Matt, suffering from a mild headache and unable to sleep, walked down to the kitchen. He opened the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and sipped quietly. Then he noticed the faint glow from the living room. Rita's laptop. He wouldn't have looked twice if not for the flicker of motion on the screen. He leaned in, expecting a Netflix tab. Instead, he saw a File Explorer window. At first it was nothing, just dull folder names. Then something caught his attention. Utilities backup. 22.zip. A compressed file. Strange. He clicked it. Nothing prepared him for what exploded onto the screen the moment the first video opened. Matt's heart stopped. His own nephews, his wife, his bedroom. His mind screamed. His hands shook, but his body stayed frozen, forcing him to watch minute by agonizing minute. He clicked another file, then another. We saw their faces, heard her voice, witnessed moments of intimacy, submission and moaning pleasure, all recorded in high definition with camera angles that suggested this wasn't an accident, it was intentional. He didn't cry, not that night. He copied the folder silently to a hidden folder on his phone. The water bottle remained untouched on the kitchen counter. Over the next 48 hours, Matt spiraled inward. He didn't lash out, didn't confront her. He went to work, greeted people, smiled. But in his mind, he replayed the scenes on a loop. The betrayal wasn't just marital. It was tribal. His blood, his own nephews, had become co-conspirators in a nightmare he didn't know he was living. He watched Dan joking on a video call with Rita, his shirt off, saying, "Your husband's got no idea, it's hilarious." Jake replied, "I wonder what his face would look like if he saw this." They laughed. Rita giggled. Matt clenched his teeth so hard he nearly cracked a molar. That's when the decision formed. He couldn't divorce her, not after what he saw. This wasn't just cheating, this was humiliation beyond repair. He couldn't let them walk around as if nothing happened, laughing, mocking, carrying on. They had to feel what he felt. He crafted the plan slowly. The job promotion, dinner, something normal, unthreatening. He told Rita to invite a few people. He told Dan and Jake to come early and help him set things up. He ordered food, bought wine, set the dining table, polished the silverware. Every move was mechanical. Rita noticed something odd that day. He was too calm, too polite. He didn't ask for her help with the arrangements, didn't scold her when she misplaced a napkin, didn't argue when she asked why Dan and Jake were the only ones he invited. She asked, "Is this just a family thing?" Matt smiled and said exactly that evening as the sun dipped below the skyline. Dusk blanketed the house. Matt dimmed the lights, placed the remote beside his plate and waited for everyone to settle down. Arrived wearing a black shirt, laughing. Jake brought a bottle of whiskey. Rita came downstairs in a silk blouse. Everyone sat. Matt raised a toast to family. And with that, he pressed play. The screen came alive and silence consumed the room. The video opened without warning. No transition, no explanation, just the horrifying graphic truth flickering across the massive 72-inch OLED screen hanging above the fireplace. The footage was unmistakable. The opening shot revealed Rita's, clad in nothing but a black lace bra, crawling across the bed. Their bed, the one she once made every morning, straightening the sheets with precision. Now it served as the backdrop for betrayal of the most perverse kind. Matt remained still, arms crossed, face unreadable. Jake was the first to react. His glass of whiskey slipped from his hand, shattering. Against the tile, amber liquid spreading like blood across the floor. Dan turned, ghost white eyes darting to the screen, then to Matt, then back to the doorway, already calculating how fast he could run. Rita's frozen mid-bite choked. Her fork dropped with a metallic clang as her lips quivered. Her breath caught in her throat like a scream begging for release. She whispered Matt's name, but it came out cracked and lost. No, she finally managed. Matt, please. The footage shifted, now showing a close-up of Jake behind her, laughing shamelessly. His voice filled the room like a death knell. He still thinks you're at yoga. Rita collapsed onto the floor, hands covering her face. Matt didn't blink. His voice came low, calm, deadly. You really thought this would stay hidden? He asked, directing the words at no one in every one. No response. He walked slowly to the remote and paused the video. The screen froze on a frame. Where? Rita was grinning, tangled between both nephews, sweat glistening, pleasure written across her features. I spent years building this house, providing for you, sacrificing sleep, dreams, time so you could live like a queen. Matt murmured, his tone void of emotion yet laced with fire. Jake backed away, hands raised. Uncle Matt, please, it was a mistake, I swear. I didn't mean to, Matt. Glare. Cut him down mid-sentence. A mistake. You filmed it, laughed, mocked me, and you did it again and again. Does that sound like a mistake or a choice? Dan interjected. Look man, we were idiots, okay? We didn't think. Matt pulled a pistol from beneath his blazer and placed it gently on the table. It made a quiet thud that echoed louder than a scream. Rita screamed, now standing abruptly, knocking over her chair. Please don't do this. I'll do anything, Matt. I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. He cut her off with a snarl. You knew exactly what you were doing. He looked at Jake. You remember the day you graduated high school? Who paid for your college dorm? Who co-signed your first car? Jake's lips trembled. You did. Matt turned to Dan. And you remember that internship interview you blew last year? Who pulled strings to get you in anyway? Dan's eyes brimmed with tears. Uncle, I'm sorry. Please. Matt shook his head. Sorry doesn't erase betrayal. Without warning, he raised the gun and fired. Jake turned, sprinting toward the hallway, but the bullet struck his spine. He collapsed face first into the wall, screaming in agony. Blood smeared across the white paint. As he clawed the floor, legs, limb, Dan lunged toward Matt, trying to wrestle the gun. In the struggle, Matt shot twice more. One bullet shattered Dan's collarbone, another pierced his neck. He gurgled, staggered, and fell backward into the dining table, toppling everything with a crash. Rita howled. She dropped to her knees, crawling toward Matt, her hands outstretched, trembling uncontrollably. Please, I'll never speak to anyone again. We can move. I'll delete everything. Please don't do this. Matt towered over her, breathing hard, sweat beginning to roll down his temple. You destroyed everything, he growled. I gave you love, stability, family. You gave me a circus. She sobbed violently, clutching his leg. I was stupid, I was desperate. You never looked at me anymore. He leaned in closer, gripping her jaw roughly. So you looked at them? She whimpered, nodding helplessly. Matt stood back. I hope hell has a mirror, he said coldly. He pulled the trigger. The first shot entered her stomach. She gasped, eyes wide, and fell back. Blood began pooling instantly, staining her ivory blouse crimson. She gasped. Matt, please. He shot her again, this time in the chest. And again, in a final time in the head. Her body convulsed once before going still. Silence descended. Only the sound of the television hummed softly in the background. Still frozen on a pornographic still of a life that no longer existed. Matt stood in the wreckage. Jake's dying groans faded into gurgling gasps. Dan was already gone. Rita's lifeless form sprawled out beside the broken tablecloth and shattered wine glasses. Matt picked up his phone and called his older brother. He didn't cry. "Brian," he said. A pause. "I killed your sons." The silence on the other end was deafening. They were sleeping. With my wife, they filmed it, hid it, laughed. He ended the call without another word. Then he called 911. "This is Matthew Hollander. I just shot my wife and 2 nephews. They're dead. I'm at 164 Brookridge Drive. I'm unarmed now. I'll be outside." He hung up, walked slowly out the front door, sat on the porch, and waited. No tears, no apologies, just a blank stare into the night sky, wondering how long betrayal had been planting its roots before it finally bloomed into carnage. The sirens pierced the silence, first distant at first, then deafening red and blue. Light splashed across Matt's expressionless face as he sat motionless on the front steps, hands folded over his lap like a man awaiting his final judgment. Officers exited their vehicles cautiously, weapons drawn, unsure if the suspect was still armed, but Matt made no move, no resistance. He slowly raised his hands. As if surrendering not just to law enforcement, but to fate itself, they ordered him onto the ground. He obeyed. Cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, cold steel against skin, but Matt didn't flinch. His eyes remained hollow, detached, as though his soul had already served its sentence long before the system could. Inside the house, horror awaited. Seasoned officers, hardened by years of violence, stood stunned. The blood, the broken bodies, the paused video still playing, Rita's moans in the background. It was grotesque, unforgivable, and unforgettable. Detectives began collecting evidence. The laptop was bagged, the phone secured, video files transferred. They didn't have to search hard. Matt had left it all open, almost begging the world to see the rot he'd uncovered by morning. The headlines screamed louder than any siren. Husband executes wife, nephews after sex. Tape discovery, triple murder shocks. Upper West Ridge, a family slaughtered by secrets. Wife's affair with husbands, nephews turns deadly. The media had a frenzy. News vans lined up outside the neighborhood. Everyone wanted a piece of the tragedy. Neighbors whispered in shock. Old friends of Rita sobbed on camera. Former co-workers of Matt stared into microphones, calling him stoic, hard-working. Not the kind of man who'd snap. But he had snapped, and now the justice system had to decide what came next. Matt's arraignment came swiftly. Clad in an orange jumpsuit, hands shackled, he walked into the courtroom with a slow, deliberate pace. Not defiant. Not broken, just done. The prosecution painted him as a methodical killer who plotted an execution. They called it cold-blooded, calculated. They showed the jury the recovered videos. Not all of them, but enough to expose the raw humiliation he endured. The defense didn't dispute the murders. They didn't try to rewrite the facts. Instead, they leaned into the why. They brought in psychologists who spoke about betrayal trauma, emotional collapse, and irreversible psychological devastation. They argued that what Matter experienced wasn't simply adultery. It was emotional torture layered with deceit. Incestuous betrayal and humiliation beyond ordinary comprehension. Matt took the stand. He spoke plainly. No dramatics, no theatrics. "I trusted her," he said, staring straight ahead. "I loved her, built everything around her, and she ripped it apart. Not just with strangers, but with my blood." And they laughed about it over and over, like it was a joke. His voice cracked. "Only once. I wasn't trying to be a monster. I became one." The courtroom was divided. Some saw a villain, others a victim turned executioner. Rita's parents were present, their faces contorted. In agony, unsure who to mourn or who to blame, Matt's brother, Brian's father of Dan and Jake, sat stone-faced, haunted. He hadn't visited Matt and jail hadn't spoken since that night. The grief had aged him 10 years and 3 months, and though he loathed what Matt did, part of him couldn't help but burn. The fury toward his sons as well, for their betrayal, for dragging their uncle into such disgrace. The jury deliberated for over 2 days. Ultimately, Matt was found guilty on 3 counts of content second-degree murder, citing emotional disturbance and provocation. It wasn't enough for an acquittal, but it spared him the death penalty. The judge sentenced him to 75 years. Without parole. There was no outburst, no protests. Matt simply nodded as he was escorted from the courtroom. He turned briefly to Brian. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. Brian didn't reply. Matt now resides in a maximum security prison in Illinois. His name trends occasionally, especially when tabloids package the story with clickbait headlines. He receives no visitors, not even letters, no family connections, no outreach from old friends. He exists in shadows, reading newspapers, sweeping floors, staring at walls where time seems to fold in on itself. A documentary was produced 6 months after the trial. Netflix rejected it for being too graphic, but an underground platform aired it. It exploded in views. Comments poured in, some calling him a monster, others calling him a martyr of betrayal. The home was sold. New owners gutted the living room and repainted the walls where blood once dried. Neighbors say they still hear odd creaks in the night, that sometimes in early dawn, a woman's cry echoes faintly from the kitchen, though no one lives there anymore. As for Brian, he relocated to Arizona. He avoids interviews, refused book deals. He buried his sons in a quiet cemetery and visits once a year. No birthdays, just the day they died. He never forgave Matt, but he also never forgave them. Rita's grave remains unmarked. Her parents couldn't decide what to etch into stone. What can you possibly write about a woman who destroyed 3 lives in her own in a search for temporary pleasure? Some stories don't have heroes, just wounds. What began as a lonely woman's escape spiraled into a catastrophic implosion of family, honor, and human decency. Matt didn't just lose a wife. He lost his identity, his bloodline, his purpose. And though prison will hold his body for decades, it was that living room the moment that video flickered to life. That truly became his cell. That second, the betrayal unfolded frame by frame. That's when the real sentence began. Some betrayals don't just break people, they unmake them. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like this video for more true crime video. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Take care and see you in the next video.